1953. A handful of engineers from a modest factory in Coventry arrived at the 24 Hours of Le Mans with a sleek British sports car that many in continental Europe dismissed as elegant but fragile. It wore no massive V12, carried none of Ferrari's political influence, and came from a nation that was still rebuilding after the war. The men who ruled endurance racing looked at it and saw another optimistic outsider. That confidence was about to become the most expensive mistake they could make. By the end of the race, Jaguar had not only beaten Ferrari on outright pace, but had forced the most feared name in motorsport to search for explanations beyond simple defeat. Within weeks, accusations began to circulate that the British victory had been achieved by bending the rules rather than by building the better machine. This is the story of the 1953 Jaguar C-Type. In the years immediately after the Second World War, Britain was rebuilding almost everything. Steel was rationed, fuel remained expensive, and exports were desperately needed to help the country's economy recover. While many European manufacturers struggled simply to survive, Jaguar cars, based in Coventry, saw racing as something much bigger than sport. The company's founder, Sir William Lyons, was not an engineer by training. He was a businessman with an extraordinary eye for design and marketing. Lyons believed people would buy Jaguars if they watched them defeat the world's fastest machines. The problem was obvious. Ferrari already ruled the imagination of Europe. Founded by Enzo Ferrari, the Italian manufacturer had become synonymous with speed. Wealthy customers bought Ferraris because they won races. Jaguar, by comparison, was still viewed by many Europeans as an ambitious British manufacturer, building refined touring cars. That perception irritated Lyons. Instead of spending fortunes on advertising campaigns, he decided the better investment would be racing at the world's greatest endurance event. The 24 Hours of Le Mans was unlike any other competition. Cars raced through the day, into darkness, through dawn, and back into daylight. Every weakness eventually revealed itself. Speed alone meant nothing if the car could not survive. Winning Le Mans meant proving both performance and reliability. It was exactly the stage Jaguar wanted. The company had already shocked Europe by winning Le Mans in 1951 with the original C-Type, but success created its own problems. Ferrari did not enjoy losing. According to period accounts, several continental journalists argued that Ferrari had merely experienced an off weekend. Ferrari chose not to pay attention to the warning signs. By 1953, the rivalry had become intensely personal. Enzo Ferrari had built his reputation on powerful engines. His latest sports racers relied upon magnificent V12 power plants capable of producing well over 220 horsepower. Ferrari engineers believed raw horsepower would always overcome smaller competitors. Jaguar looked almost conservative beside them. Under the long aluminum bonnet of the C-Type sat a 3.4-litre inline six-cylinder engine, producing approximately 220 horsepower. It lacked the dramatic cylinder count of Ferrari's V12, but it was remarkably smooth and exceptionally durable over long distances. The difference was not just horsepower, it was efficiency. Jaguar's chief engineer, William Heynes, together with brilliant aerodynamicist Malcolm Sayer, understood something many competitors still underestimated. The fastest car over 24 hours was not necessarily the one with the biggest engine. It was the one that spent less time slowing down. What Ferrari did not know was that Jaguar had quietly been developing something revolutionary. Sayer had spent years designing aircraft during the war. Unlike many automobile stylists who relied largely on artistic instinct, Sayer approached every curve mathematically. His philosophy was simple: air should be guided, not fought. The revised C-Type became lower, cleaner, and noticeably more slippery through the air. At the high speeds reached along the Mulsanne Straight, those subtle changes translated into precious seconds every lap. While Ferrari focused on adding power, Jaguar focused on removing resistance. In reality, it would transform endurance racing. But finding more speed was only part of the problem. Stopping repeatedly from nearly 150 miles per hour presented an even greater challenge. Le Mans demanded heavy braking hundreds of times across 24 relentless hours. Traditional drum brakes generated enormous heat. As temperatures climbed, braking performance faded dramatically. Every manufacturer accepted this as normal. Jaguar refused to. Working alongside engineers from Dunlop, Jaguar developed one of the most important innovations in racing history: disc brakes. The concept itself was not entirely new, but adapting them for endurance racing proved extraordinarily difficult. The problem was heat. The solution was beautifully practical. Instead of enclosing the braking surfaces inside large drums where heat became trapped, Jaguar mounted flat metal discs that remained exposed to cooling air. Hydraulic calipers squeezed both sides of the disc evenly, producing consistent stopping power lap after lap. Think about what that meant. While Ferrari drivers had to brake earlier as their drum brakes faded during the race, Jaguar drivers could continue braking later, corner after corner, hour after hour. The advantage accumulated silently. One corner, then another. Over hundreds of laps, those tiny gains became enormous. According to mechanics who worked with the team, early testing was anything but glamorous. Brake components overheated, seals failed, and engineers often finished long sessions covered in brake dust and hydraulic fluid. But it worked. Nobody outside Jaguar fully appreciated what had just happened. Many rivals looked only at engine specifications. Very few paid serious attention to the brakes. That oversight would cost them dearly. Technology alone never wins races. Drivers must trust it completely. One of Jaguar's greatest advantages came in the form of Stirling Moss, the remarkably fast London-born driver, already establishing himself as one of Britain's finest racing talents. Moss possessed an unusual gift. He could describe exactly what a racing car was doing at speed. During extensive testing before Le Mans, Moss pushed the C-Type harder than almost anyone thought sensible. The purpose was not to set records, it was to expose weaknesses. According to team members, Moss repeatedly returned to the pits asking for seemingly tiny adjustments that eventually transformed the car's balance. While Ferrari believed race pace would decide Le Mans, Jaguar concentrated on maintaining that pace without exhausting either machine or driver. It was a fundamentally different philosophy. Everything pointed toward June 1953. Everything pointed toward Le Mans. Neither side intended to finish second. When the Jaguar team arrived at Le Mans in June 1953, most spectators admired the C-Type before it had even turned a wheel. But the engineers standing beside it were not interested in beauty. They were interested in airflow. At racing speeds approaching 150 miles per hour on the Mulsanne Straight, air became an invisible wall. Malcolm Sayer understood that better than almost anyone. The problem was straightforward. The C-Type needed more speed without asking the engine to produce more power. Building a larger engine would have increased weight, fuel consumption, and mechanical stress during a 24-hour race. The solution was wonderfully simple: reduce drag. The revised 1953 body was smoother around the nose, lower across the cockpit, and cleaner around the rear wheels. If two cars produced roughly the same horsepower, the one pushing less air would travel faster while consuming less fuel. That meant fewer pit stops, less time standing still. The chassis itself remained a lightweight tubular space frame wrapped in thin aluminium panels. Every unnecessary pound disappeared. While Ferrari continued trusting brute force, Jaguar quietly built efficiency into every inch of the car. The engine, the brakes, the aerodynamics, the weight. None of them was individually unbeatable. Together, they formed something far more dangerous, a complete endurance racing machine. Ferrari's V12 engines were spectacular. Their sound echoed across the French countryside like artillery fire. Jaguar's Straight 6 sounded different, calmer, smoother, almost restrained. Some rivals mistook that refinement for weakness. They were wrong. The challenge facing engineers was enormous. An engine running flat out for 24 consecutive hours generates tremendous heat. Oil breaks down, bearings wear, valves suffer enormous stress. Jaguar's answer was not exotic, it was disciplined engineering. Every component had been tested relentlessly. According to period accounts, Jaguar mechanics often worked late into the night, checking tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. What Enzo Ferrari did not know was that reliability had become Jaguar's greatest weapon. A faster car that brakes after 12 hours is worthless. A slightly slower car that runs perfectly for 24 hours usually wins. Driver Tony Rolt, a former British Army officer who had escaped from a German prisoner of war camp during the Second World War, appreciated dependable machinery more than most. His teammate, Duncan Hamilton, could not have been more different. Charismatic, fearless, and famous for enjoying life almost as much as racing. Together, they formed an unlikely partnership, yet both trusted the C-Type completely. Because while Ferrari concentrated on outrunning Jaguar, Jaguar quietly planned to outlast Ferrari. Practice at Le Mans revealed an uncomfortable truth. The Jaguars were not merely competitive, they were frighteningly consistent. Ferrari's drivers remained quick, sometimes even quicker over a single lap, but endurance racing is never won over one lap. Observers standing near the braking zones noticed something unusual. The Jaguars continued braking incredibly late, even after hours of running. Ferrari drivers began slowing earlier. Their drum brakes were fading exactly as physics predicted. The British cars simply carried more speed into every braking zone. Not dramatically, just enough. 1 second here, half a second there. Tiny advantages multiplied across 304 laps of racing. Inside the Ferrari camp, frustration began replacing confidence. According to several contemporary reports, discussions increasingly centered on how Jaguar had found such extraordinary braking performance. Some suspected hidden tricks, others blamed luck. Very few admitted the obvious. Jaguar had simply built a better solution. Meanwhile, inside the Jaguar garage, calm replaced anxiety. Mechanics worked methodically. No celebrations. Not yet. They understood Le Mans better than anyone. The hardest part was still ahead. Quick pause before the final chapter, because everything from here on is where Ferrari's frustration turned into outright accusations, and one of Le Mans' greatest victories became one of its biggest controversies. I go through the comments on every one of these videos, so if there is a car, driver, or racing era you want covered next, leave it down there. And if stories like this one are your kind of thing, subscribing is the easiest way to make sure the next one finds you. Now, back to 1953. As darkness settled over the Circuit de la Sarthe, Jaguar's strategy became obvious. They were not trying to dominate every lap, they were trying to eliminate mistakes. Drivers settled into a relentless rhythm, handing the cars from one teammate to another with military precision. Fuel stops were clean, tire changes remained efficient. Most importantly, the disc brakes continued performing almost exactly as they had at the beginning of the race. That consistency began breaking Ferrari's confidence. While the Italian cars fought mechanical issues and increasing brake wear, the C-types kept circulating with almost machine-like discipline. According to people inside the paddock, the mood in the Italian camp became noticeably tense as dawn approached. Nobody there could fully explain why Jaguar refused to slow down. What they did not know was that every hour of testing, every late-night engineering session in Coventry, and every adjustment Stirling Moss had demanded months earlier was paying dividends at exactly the right moment. The establishment believed endurance racing belonged to factory power and enormous engines. In reality, it belonged to the team that wasted the fewest seconds. By sunrise, everyone watching Le Mans understood that history was about to be written. Morning at Le Mans changes everything. The darkness disappears, the crowds return to the fences, and every team suddenly realizes there are only a few hours left to save or lose an entire year of work. Jaguar entered those final hours in command. Not comfortably, but convincingly. The leading C-Type, driven by Duncan Hamilton and Tony Rolt, continued circulating with astonishing consistency. After nearly 20 hours of racing, the Jaguar was still stopping almost as confidently as it had during the opening laps. That simply wasn't supposed to happen in 1953. While Ferrari mechanics fought overheating drum brakes and the mechanical punishment of an all-night race, Jaguar's disc brakes continued doing exactly what they had been designed to do. According to period accounts, members of rival teams spent increasing amounts of time studying the British cars whenever they entered the pits, searching for anything unusual. Some simply refused to believe the explanation could be so simple. When a dominant team loses, pride often searches for another answer. As the checkered flag approached, whispers spread through the paddock. Perhaps Jaguar had found a loophole. Perhaps the British had stretched the regulations. Perhaps those strange brakes weren't entirely legal. There was remarkably little evidence supporting any of it, but defeat has always been fertile ground for rumor. Inside the Jaguar garage, none of that mattered. They only had to finish. At exactly 4 o'clock on June 14, 1953, after 24 hours and 304 laps of relentless punishment around the Circuit de la Sarthe, the green Jaguar C-Type crossed the finish line. Victory. Duncan Hamilton and Tony Rolt had delivered one of the greatest performances Le Mans had ever seen. Their winning average speed exceeded 105 miles per hour, making them the first winners in Le Mans history to average over the 100-mile-per-hour barrier for the entire race. That was not just another victory. It was a new standard. Even more devastating for Ferrari was what happened behind them. Jaguar didn't simply win. The C-Type finished first, second, fourth, and ninth, overwhelming the field and proving the result could not be dismissed as fortunate strategy or driver brilliance alone. It was engineering superiority. Then came the accusations. According to contemporary reports and later historical accounts, rivals questioned Jaguar's braking system, hinting that the British team had somehow gained an unfair advantage. Rumours circulated throughout the paddock. Yet race officials found no evidence of cheating. The disc brakes complied with the rules. They were simply years ahead of what everyone else had imagined. In reality, Jaguar had not broken the regulations. They had broken conventional thinking. That is an important difference. Enzo Ferrari himself had long dismissed many British competitors as garagisti, garage owners rather than true manufacturers. It was a remark that reflected his belief that only large continental factories possessed the knowledge to dominate international racing. The irony could not have been greater. While Ferrari relied upon tradition, Jaguar relied upon innovation. While Ferrari searched for more horsepower, Jaguar searched for more efficiency. They called it cheating. History called it the future. Within only a few seasons, disc brakes spread across top-level motorsport. Manufacturers that had questioned Jaguar's approach suddenly began developing similar systems of their own, because they had no choice. Today, every modern Formula One car, every Le Mans hypercar, every Indy car, and virtually every high-performance road car relies on the same basic principle Jaguar proved on that June afternoon in France. The technology evolved. The idea never changed. There was another human story hidden beneath the statistics. Only days before the race, Duncan Hamilton and Tony Rolt had actually been disqualified during scrutineering, before the decision was overturned on appeal. According to Hamilton's own recollections, he arrived at race morning feeling considerably less than perfect. Yet over the next 24 hours, he produced the defining drive of his career. The victory transformed Jaguar forever. Sales increased dramatically around the world. More importantly, the C-Type established principles that every serious endurance racing team would eventually adopt: reliability before spectacle, efficiency before excess, engineering before ego. Its influence reached directly into the legendary Jaguar D-Type, which won Le Mans 3 consecutive times from 1955 through 1957, and inspired generations of British constructors who proved that intelligence could defeat size. Companies like Lotus, Cooper, McLaren, and later Williams would all embrace the same philosophy: build smarter, not merely bigger. The 1953 victory also marked one of the defining moments in Britain's rise as a global motorsport power. Within little more than a decade, the nation once dismissed as producing elegant touring cars would become the center of world racing technology. The seeds of that revolution were planted at Le Mans. And that is the greatest irony of all. Ferrari laughed at the British car right up until the moment it rewrote endurance racing. They called it cheating. Then they copied it. If this changed how you think about endurance racing, subscribe. More stories from motorsport's greatest underdogs are coming soon.